I'll call this meeting to order, and let me share my screen. All right. Looks like this is our agenda. Can everyone see this? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So I can give a report card update, which, as a reminder, the Iowa County dashboard is now being updated on Fridays. So with that in mind, we won't have the latest score or update until tomorrow, but I can share with you our score as of October 23rd. And then maybe Dr. Fox can kind of speak to what things are looking like this week. Let me get our report card pulled up. All right. So this would be as of last Friday. Our score was, our score was added to. Those were all of the numbers taken directly from the Iowa County dashboard. And I will show you then like the trend. This is not, and so this is what the numbers have looked like for the past, from the beginning. So any questions on this or discussion? And Dr. Fox, I welcome your insight as to maybe predictions or what we think our score might look like tomorrow.
I think our score will be probably exactly the same. Can you go back to the scoring card? Mm-hmm. So our cases per day is going to be, I think we're closer to 13 right now. So that will be the -1 for that. And then the next is the percent positivity. And I think we're about the same at about 8%. So that'll be a red for that. And then we are still well in the green for the testing. So that'll be exactly the same. We're still rising because we're 13 compared to 11. And then community spread. Actually, I didn't look at that number, but I think the last time I saw it was over 40. So I think we'll probably not change that one either, I'm guessing, based on what I saw so far this week.
Great, thank you.
And I think community spread was, as of Wednesday, was at like 43%.
All right, and I know we had kind of put at as kind of the caveats is look at the score, active cases, and capacity. I don't know if Jane is on, but if she's not, Mitch, do you have any updates on how things are going in the schools?
I think Jane is on and she could share, but we had a, I'll call it a mishap. There was an inaccurate reading of a test result. So an individual came to school and then we were notified that they looked at the test results incorrectly and notified us that what they thought was a negative is actually a positive. We were able to then remove the situation. It was in the building for a very short period of time, but we would have had a positive in the building today, and then an additional quarantine due to being a close contact. But other than that, we've had, I guess, some better news. I don't know, Jane, if you'd like to speak to it, looking at the numbers.
I'm sorry, I don't have all the numbers of how many people are out right now. Quite a few. Lots of close contacts, household contacts, lots of people out not calling me or contacting me. So I don't know why. Some people are out for reasons they shouldn't have to be quarantined for. So it makes me wonder why they're staying home. I worry that there's a lot of maybe a misunderstanding of why people need to stay home. So I'm just encouraging lots of people to reach out to me to make sure that they get accurate information.
Jane, in terms of the people that are out, is it a mix of students and staff, or more heavily students right now?
Right now, it's more heavily students who are out for close contacts. We do have some staff, but mostly students for sure.
And I would say, and Jane, you can certainly correct me, but just before coming back, there had been an exposure outside. So a lot of the close contacts had not been in the building prior to needing to stay home.
Yes, and that continues to be true. Most of our close contacts are not people who have been in the building yet, with us only being open, 3 days to students so far. It's not people that I'm worried about, then turning positive and having to then send more home. There's potential always, but so far so good after, the short time we've reopened.
Great. So Jane, I will update this report card for you tomorrow and get you and Mitch the update. So I think that kind of covers the report card update, unless there's any other discussion or questions.
And, when you looked at those three markers, what's going on and then capacity, our capacity has not changed because we're staying in the hybrid, and the hybrid was built around being able to keep social distance, wearing the masks, all those kinds of things. So our capacity hasn't changed due to an increase in the number of students back in the buildings.
Okay.
Did the board adopt the report card, or as far as recommendations from it, or is it kind of a moving target a little bit as far as other conditions too? I mean, obviously you don't go 100% by this, but.
They adopted using the report card as a tool. There's been a lot of board meetings, so forgive me which date it was. I want to say on the 12th of October at that board meeting is the day they adopted to use the report card and the metrics as one of the tools that they would use in making decisions.
Okay. Because right now it should be virtual, right? I mean, according to the report card, but I mean, they're only using this as one factor. I'm guessing it's not the end all be all for their decisions.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So we can move to our second agenda item, virtual learning update. I'm not quite sure. I don't have an update on that, but maybe Mitch, you may.
This has kind of come out of the board when they wanted the ad hoc committee created, was to kind of continue to reach out to people and, what is going on, what is the feeling towards the virtual learning environment. I would, again, throw it over to our local committee expert and let him speak, because he's doing more virtual learning than any of the rest of us will be doing. So Matthew, would you like to weigh in and kind of say, at least from your perspective, how it's going? And if you're hearing anything from your friends about what virtual learning is like so far?
So yeah, I can weigh in on that a little bit. I personally, at the beginning of this week, switched from the hybrid model to going all virtual, just for, safety reasons. I thought it was a good decision. My parents agreed, so I made that switch. But overall, I feel like being virtual has been a really good experience this year. The teachers have done, in my opinion, an excellent job organizing what I have to do, setting it up and just being able to communicate always. I feel like what I'm hearing from my fellow peers is also very positive. It's been a really good experience. And especially during those 2 weeks in which we were all virtual, everybody, the days that every student had to do Zooms rather than going into school, I felt that went really well. It was organized. We learned about it beforehand, knew what we were supposed to do, knew the expectations. And it just overall, I think it went really well. And I think virtual learning as a whole has gone really well. There's been a lot of opportunities to just continue learning and continue going through kind of almost what school would be like in a normal year, but it's been as close as I think it could be. It's been really good. So I can say positive things about it, and I'm sure a lot of my classmates could definitely echo that feeling.
That's wonderful to hear.
I would ask Dr. Fox, Gina Docknall, Jane, obviously all of you have students, in the district. Bob, if there's anything that you guys would like to share as well.
I'll speak to my kids are 11th grade, 8th grade with Matthew, and then 6th grade. And I think are learning pretty close to what they would normally be getting in a curriculum. Some of the things that I remember from 6th grade when my 8th grader and 11th grader did it, they're doing the exact same projects. It's just in a little bit different format. I did appreciate I don't remember which day it was last week, but there were a lot of extra help available for kids that maybe needed to figure out redos for tests or things like that at the end of the quarter. And so I overheard my 8th graders virtual study hall for math. And that was really, I think a very robust kind of learning was happening within that system. So that was really good. My 11th grader is thinking about going fully virtual at this point, just like Matthew had some questions about safety, and also just feels like she learns well in a virtual way. I think it's helpful to have that in-person reinforcement when we're able to get it. So I'm not super enthused about that, but I think at this point I've been really impressed with what they're able to do, and the kids are really, at least my age kids, are very able to do this on their own. So I'm not having to micromanage, like, you have a Zoom call at this time, who has to log in, how do you log in, all of that. The teachers are really helping the kids be very independent with this, which I think are just some really good lessons for them, moving forward into college and things like that. But so we have had no real issues with virtual learning on our end.
My child has been, so I have a kindergartner, and we've been fully virtual the whole time. And we have had just a delightful experience in the kinder class. And it's been a delight.
I've had the same experience. My kids are the hybrid, and then, fully virtual for the last couple weeks. And I have a 2nd grader and a 4th grader and a pre-K. The 2nd grader and 4th grader are super independent with everything, which is, I'm really impressed at how much they've matured and been able to, set alarms for themselves and log on themselves and troubleshoot computer problems themselves. I'm really proud of them. My pre-K, since I was working from home, I was able to watch her. That was she just didn't have as much, she would lose interest a little quicker. She would always have the screen up and she was coloring, but I would have to say, like, look up, show them you're paying attention. But she would sing along and she loved it. But I know that, she would prefer to be there and interacting in person.
Bob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's been going pretty well for Chloe. She's a senior. It's, I mean, some of the, obviously, if you're in person, you can get more one-on-one in-person assistance a little bit better, you know, maybe explaining stuff. So I think a lot of her classes is kind of learning on her own type thing, kind of like an online college class. I know a lot of the teachers do YouTube videos, which is real helpful. You know, it's like having a lecture. But if they don't have the YouTube videos, then it's kind of I think it's assignments. You know, looking for other resources. I think they have the resources. It's just a matter of learning it a different way than what high school kids are used to, you know, through lecture. But it's a lot better than last year. But there's just a few more challenges, you know, than what kids are used to, I think. And I don't know with I think on the Friday when she meets, I guess that's mainly test day because they don't really have virtual tests. Everything is in-person test still. But I think if you went full virtual for an extended period of time, I'm not sure how the testing, you know, that might be something that has to be worked out, how to go virtual for testing. But right now it seems to be working pretty good. So for her, it's not so much hands-on. You know, that day is more of test day and touch and base day, but it's not, you know, like a regular lecturing that you'd have person. But I mean, you know, it's hybrid, so we're all going to expect that. But it's a lot better than last year, though.
That's good to hear. Oh, Maggie, Erica, and Gina.
Yeah, I have a son. My son's also all virtual, full-time virtual. He's been really enjoying it, and the other families that I've spoken to are also like really pleased with what the school district has put together. We actually have done some testing. I know it's a little less serious than high school testing, but we were asked to act as a proctor for some tests for him, which was an interesting system and seemed to work out well. I just think the overall feeling from the virtual families right now is that like we've really hit a good stride with kids being able to be independent. There was actually a little bit of a disruption, not necessarily in our household, but I heard this from other people that when everybody went all virtual during the shutdown last 2 weeks ago, that did kind of put a little hiccup in what had become a pretty steady, series of events in the mornings or whatever. Getting everybody logged on for those first times was a little trickier. So I know that we've heard from teachers about consistency and what the school board is asking them to do. And I could definitely see the gears grinding a little bit on those days, but as always, they overcame and things smoothed out again. So yeah, overall, very satisfied, very happy with the all virtual option.
Erica or Gina, do you wish to weigh in?
Sure, I can. I have a third grader, a second grader, and a kindergartner, and they're in hybrid, but then obviously went virtual, and it's been good. I have just great things to say. I feel like I've had the opportunity a few times to see my kids when they were traditionally in the virtual model. Not as much because I work full time, but in the last few weeks I have, and it's been really, really good. My kids are, they're elementary age, but they're really engaged, and that's a task, watching a kindergarten, Zoom meeting. That's not for the faint of heart. So I appreciate the things that they do and ways to keep them engaged. And honestly, at that age, I expect to be able to need to do things outside of that time with my daughter. And it's been really manageable and realistic and fun. So nothing but good things to say.
And I would say that we've had a good experience as well. This is Gina Docknell. So my kids are hybrid. I have an 8th grader, a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 2nd grader. They would prefer to be in person. Ultimately that's all of our goals, I'm sure. I agree with Dr. Fox about them, like learning new skills. I mean, the technology and the communication, they're learning how to be independent and manage their time. They're learning to communicate with teachers, if they have an issue, so that they're handling it, one-on-one with them. I think the teachers have done an amazing job. But it is a huge challenge, if in the future we think we're going to, have to virtual again or back and forth to hybrid, I also have the opportunity of working at the elementary school, and I just know the prep and the time and the energy that has to go into preparing, trying to switch gears, and it is very challenging. And hopefully, we'll get this figured out, and but our experience has been good.
And I can kind of build on some of those things that some of these people have said. I mean, obviously, one of the hidden benefits of going and having these virtual experiences is obviously it's been really beneficial in the sense that as a student, we've been able to build on time management skills and communicating with teachers. That's been great. And then to answer Bob's question about testing, so when I was virtual for the 2 weeks, and then even now, it's kind of been a mixture of two things. So sometimes teachers will give us, email us the quiz and say, do this quiz and you can use your notes, kind of like what an open note test would be if I was to be in person. Then the other experience that I've had is I would be on a Zoom call with a teacher and have my camera on and my microphone on, and they would watch me take the test to kind of get it as close to being that real in-person experience as possible.
And I don't know if Mr. Austin is on right now or with a home volleyball match. He might be preoccupied here a little bit too, but I know that at the high school level, they've had conversations with the staff because I've heard a lot of staff communications around, I don't want to use face-to-face day for just a lecture because I could provide that through a Zoom meeting. I want to be able to, have a lab set up and kids are working in a lab, or it might be a time for an assessment. And then I think the high school staff found out that, well, we know the freshmen are in today, so that's the day I'm giving an exam, and all of a sudden the freshmen were taking an exam almost every period. So I think that they're trying to work that out and get a schedule together at the high school level. Say, okay, we're not going to try to test. There he is. There's Mr. Austin. Maybe he can do that.
I gotta get my ear thing back in. Sorry. Yeah, we do have a schedule put together now that kind of lays out what everything looks like. So it is very helpful to try and obviously not have every exam on the same day or every quiz, because that makes it a little more difficult for students trying to prep for 7 different classes. So I know they're trying to spread that out better. I know with the mixture of hybrid and virtual kids right now, or in person and the virtual kids, they're looking at different ways to obviously assess things as well. So.
Great. So Mitch, is that a good virtual learning update from us? Do you think there's anything additional needed for the school board?
I would have one question real quick, which is hearing from Sarah and Matt, is there a significant number of people who are choosing to stay virtual after this last shutdown, or have most students returned?
With the last board meeting, there's some students that aren't able to come back until in the high school, the athletes are asked to quarantine for 14 days after their last day of competition. So we have some cross-country athletes that are out right now. All of the football team is out. We have some soccer students, they're playing tonight, and then the volleyball is playing tonight. So we do have a lot more high school students that have to stay virtual. We have had some students and their families opt into staying virtual right now as well. I don't have an exact number though.
Okay, thanks.
Is there nobody on here mentioned it, but I know there's a couple families that open enrolled into Belmont because they wanted to have more in-person contact, more elementary school kids. But I'm guessing there's, and you've heard of, I mean, you must know of a handful of parents that have a problem with coordinating being home and their jobs and that type of thing.
Yes, yeah, we, all of the open enrollments out or in come across my desk for final approval. And I've never denied anybody, but yeah, we did have another family take 2 children to Belmont because their model is 5 days a week. But I've also had a couple of people open enroll in recently too because of being in the hybrid. So it's not a wash as the same number out and in. Our open enrollment numbers are still positive for the district, but we have lost several families because of the current model that we're in.
You see, I mean, are there still families that are not open enrolled that are talking about, or, kind of stressed with the hybrid, or are they settling in with figuring out a plan? Or
I have not, I've not had anybody reach out to me asking, how soon are we going to phase 2? How soon are you bringing back anybody? Because we're going to go somewhere else. If it's not, tomorrow, I've called me with those kind of questions or sent me emails. So I don't know if there's people, still holding out hope that we bring more kids back into school. But, I shared at the board meeting, that as we look at the report card as a tool, obviously, Dr. Dunn pointed out at the meeting that, that this isn't kids coming to school, getting sick in school and then going home and spreading the virus. That this is people in the community that are choosing to go on a large group ATV ride. Then the next thing you know, out of 30 people, 15 are positive. Or there was hey, we're going to have watch the Badger game. Come on over to my house, and there was 10 people there, and now 6 of them are. Those kinds of things are happening out in the community, and it's having an impact whether or not we should allow students back in, or staff members are now close contacts, or whatever the case may be. So, as Dr. Dunn said, it's really a community event that's impacting the school district.
Right.
So Mitch, I have a question.
Go ahead, Gina.
I'm sorry. I'm curious, just, so when you say that because somebody had contacted me today, so I know that there's some testing going on for PSATs and that type of thing. If they're juniors, I mean, obviously juniors, seniors, whatever, whoever has to take this, are those athletes? I mean, I assume that those tests have to be taken at school. They can't just take those at home. So how does that work for the ones that are quarantined?
They came to a specific room, tested, and then left the building out of that same room. So there was, socially distanced in the test location. So we tried to follow as many guidelines as we could, but we didn't deny those kids that opportunity to be able to take that PSAT exam either.
Can I add something there? In addition, so we used 2 different rooms. We actually had the athletes in one of those rooms, socially distanced and stuff, and we had the students that were in the hybrid in-person model in a different room. So we did separate them that way, still kept that distance.
Matt, with all the kids that are being virtual now for could be several weeks, are they having a different? Are you guys working on plans to do assessments virtually now, or it's been 2 weeks now, and I think a lot of teachers are trying to get the assessments, the testing today, but I don't know if you guys have had discussions about that, because it could go on for, like Chloe will be another 2 weeks probably.
Right. They're trying some different ways out. So where they, like Matthew was talking about, where they have the camera on, just to make it, obviously we trust kids and stuff, but it's easier to manipulate things when you have resources available. So we're trying some different ways to make sure that we can hold kids accountable. So they are doing tests or assessments over Zoom, making kids share their screen, making kids keep their camera on and their microphone on, doing a split screen so they can see that. Trying out some different things. I think you may see some more, project-based stuff here too, to show what they've learned, respond to this, speak about it, record yourself, because it's a little more authentic, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So would you have proctors? Would you have proctors for these types of Zoom?
So those types of Zooms the teachers are doing.
Okay. So it'll be like 10 at a time or?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Something like that. Right. They kind of make the kids share their screen or keep their camera on and keep their microphone on. And then you can make it do a split screen. So like right now you could change your computer to split screen. So half their screen has to be the quiz or whatever, and then half their screen has to be the camera so you can see it.
Okay. And then they'd have to put into sorry, Sarah.
That's okay.
One last thing. So they would, right now, I think it's not in a computer format, so they'd have to move it into a computer format.
Yeah. A lot of those teachers are transitioning over to like a Google Forms or a Google Quiz format. So yeah, they're transitioning them over to a computer-based type of thing.
And would that be multiple choice? Like if you're doing calculus, it might be hard on
It doesn't have to be. If it's let's pick calculus, for example. It could be here's the question, and then just type the answer into there, or hold your paper up to the screen at that point, or take a picture of your screen.
Okay.
So there's ways to do it. It's definitely a learning curve for everybody, but it's doable.
Okay, I'm done, Sarah.
I have two questions. One was going back to when you talked about open enrolling students out of the district, whether that's primarily or all elementary grade students, or whether you're able to tell us that, and you may not be able to tell us that. The separate question was whether there's been a consideration of doing, rather than having the in-person day be that assessment day, whether there could be like a large room, like half the gym or something like that, where you could have a proctor sitting there and they come and show up and they take their Spanish test out that's listed under their name, and it has instructions of whether they can use notes or not, and then they go and sit and do their tests, to not take up that in-person instructional time for those assessments for those kids, or for virtual kids who need to do some sort of in-person assessment rather than one over the computer. Just those are my two questions.
I can tell you for the assessment piece, we have had virtual kids before we went to the fully virtual model. We have had them come in on like Wednesday when the building just has the teachers in it to take quizzes and tests as a way. It's definitely an option. It's tough to use like a place like the gym because it's being used by middle school, high school throughout the day at the various times, and it's usually every hour. The library would be a place possibly for that. We have had kids come in extra to get help and to take some of those things to get caught up. So possibility, obviously with the athletes being out, it makes it a little trickier because now we are bringing them into the building if we need to do something like that. But I mean, it's certainly a possibility. We have used the library like that type of a model though, too. Mitch, you'll have to answer the enrollment question. I can't answer that one.
I'll say predominantly younger grades are the ones that have been leaving, and most of the districts around us right now, with the exception of one, are in more of a hybrid in that middle high school level. obviously, I don't know if everybody heard, but yesterday, Dodgeville at the end of the day informed all their students and families that they're going 100% virtual. Their projected return date is December 1st. Pecatonica School District, from what I know, is still middle school, high school. That's in the Blanchardville community, is still 100% virtual. Darlington at the high school level is in a hybrid model, kind of doing a block schedule. And Iowa Grant just sent out, not due to any outbreak, but as their superintendent said, we're trying to be proactive. They were scheduled on their calendar to come in prior to Thanksgiving, and they had decided to give everybody that week off. So teachers will be in Monday, Tuesday, but no students that week of Thanksgiving. And then they're taking the next week off as well, thinking, okay, if people are together and families, maybe it would be wise to buy some time before everybody comes back to school. So they will be 100% virtual the week after Thanksgiving. So they would be coming back into school December 7th, I believe, is their expected return date in the Iowa Grant School District.
And Mitch, can you comment, does our school board usually think ahead or be proactive around, would they operate that way, or is that a recommendation that this committee should make around thinking like around the holidays?
I think that would be a wonderful thing for the committee to recommend. I don't. I think there's a huge focus on what can we do to try to get more students back in our buildings, and I think everybody wants that, from parents to staff members. And I think maybe there's things that the committee might be able to do to help educate community members on what they might be able to do to help us move closer to that. Obviously, if we were to, keep to smaller groups and social distance and face mask and everything else and hand hygiene, everything we're asking our kids to do inside the buildings, if the committee, if the community could lead by example, might be able to turn those numbers around a little bit, at least for the point students and families. I don't know. I would be hesitant, in all honesty, I would be hesitant to recommend that to the school board, knowing that their emphasis is the other direction. I know one school district had floated the idea of sending kids home for Thanksgiving and going virtual until the start of second semester, kind of what colleges are doing. And if you're going to go home, let's go home and make you self-isolate. We know college kids won't necessarily do that, but not come back until sometime in January. Our problem is this year with our calendar, our semester ends as we head to Christmas break. That's the end of our semester. So we would be coming back to start second semester. But I think, it would be certainly something that the community might want to recommend, if you're all in agreement, that something to at least consider, something for them to talk about, coming board meeting. Marcia?
Yeah, so it seems like the community wants, some people in the community want to go back to full-time school, but they're not willing to take the precautions to help us get there. And my question is then about Thanksgiving. People probably will get together and have family functions, and to come back right away after Thanksgiving, do you see that as a potential problem? Because if families are going to get together in large groups for Thanksgiving, then like the Badger games and the ATV events, kids will be exposed, people will be exposed, and it would just spread it into the school the next week.
If
Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. I think, honestly, the numbers are going up in the community now, even before the holidays are here. what we really need to rely on, in addition to the community, is open communication from parents and families about where they've been, who they've been with, if they're affected in any way by somebody they suspect is positive or by symptoms that anyone is experiencing. The biggest thing we rely on is for parents to communicate to us so that we can prevent someone from coming into the building when they shouldn't be there.
If a family voluntarily said, we were at a family gathering, I'm going to want to go virtual for 2 weeks, how easy is that without tracing, et cetera, have a little bit of their own judgment, basically saying, I want to go virtual. So is it difficult to just switch from hybrid to virtual, or is there more, difficulty than that? I know you have to quarantine if you have to quarantine, but.
What I would say about people taking it into their own hands and saying, well, we're going to go virtual for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, they think, well, if I go home for 2 weeks, then I've done my 2 weeks, I've done my time, and I'm coming back. It's what has happened at what point over those 2 weeks that they're home, because things can change. They can be exposed on day 13, and then maybe it's not appropriate for them to come back. So if people are going to choose to go to virtual, I totally respect it. They should have that option, but they need to stay in communication throughout their quarantine and let me know what's going on before they come back, because it might not be appropriate for them to come back at the point that they think that they should.
So, but if it's a large gathering, typically quarantine for safety's sake, nobody tested positive, but large gathering, we're going to quarantine 14 days. Something else could happen in that time, but not a large gathering. So it's, kind of preemptively quarantine or go virtual for that sake. Is that?
It sounds
not a good idea?
It sounds like a really good idea. It does. And I think if people want to do that, that's a really good idea. It just don't get comfortable in the thought that you might be okay to come back on that 15th day, because again, if you develop symptoms in the meantime, or you have another interaction with someone who's potentially positive, I don't want people to get set. Well, I proactively chose to stay home for 14 days. Super. I'm really glad you did that. But you need to stay in communication in the meantime if there are any changes to symptoms in the household or interactions with other people who have potential to be positive.
And
So would that
the other thing I'll say for that is that, if you get exposed at a large gathering and 8 days later, your body is infected. So you may be asymptomatic, so you may not know that you're infected. If you don't get tested, you would not know that you have it. And the quarantine period is from, if you had gotten tested on day 8 and tested positive, it would be 10 days beyond that. So now you're at day 18 after the large gathering, not day 14. So you would be exposing people during those 4 days that you're going there thinking that you're in the clear. So if you're not getting tested during that time period of quarantine, you can't reliably say that 14 days is enough. Or say you don't test positive, but your sibling at home tests positive during that time, that starts over your quarantine at 14 days. And again, many of these people are asymptomatic, so they may not know if they're not getting tested if they've gotten exposed.
So on the county website, it says they test once a week on Tuesdays, or is it every day?
So we test at Upland Hills Health every day between 70, and we did 108 people yesterday, which was the most we've done since beginning. So that's on-demand testing for anybody who lives or works in Iowa County or has a healthcare provider in Iowa County. There's also a community test site in Dodgeville. I believe it's still every other week because they're alternating with Lafayette County testing in Darlington. So that community test site is on demand. You don't need any healthcare provider or anything to order anything. So that's whoever wants to get tested there. And then there are some other community test sites that are available to us as well. So say like Lancaster has a community test site at times, Platteville does, the Lion Energy Center, Spring Green has one on Mondays. So there's lots of places around that people can get tested.
But the community testing in Dodgeville, is that just on Tuesdays? Every other Tuesday?
Every other Tuesday.
Every other Thursday.
Thursday.
They're moving it to
They changed
Thursday.
to Thursday, yeah.
Thursday, okay. But more typically in a, if you have symptoms, you're gonna go to the hospital, right? I mean, you're not gonna wait.
You can get symptoms. Most people in the county right now, if they're getting tested through the Upland Hills site. So that's the majority of the testing that's happening in the county. But if you have symptoms or not, you can get tested through that community test site. But most people, you're right, will not wait till Thursday. If they have symptoms on Sunday, hopefully they're getting tested before Thursday.
And then Upland Hills, that's Monday through Friday testing?
Every day, 7 days a week.
7 days a week. Okay, so they call and make an appointment or something like that.
They call the hospital line and they get transferred to the COVID nurse who sets them up for the test. So they don't need an order, or it's a drive-up test that they get scheduled a little slot for.
So what you're saying before, you're talking about asymptomatic, if they have something and they can spread it unless they tested. So does the hospital or, do they recommend people testing, 7 days after a big event, 10 days after a big event? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, after exposure.
Testing?
Yeah, after exposure to somebody who's known to be positive, we're recommending 5 to 7 days after that exposure, if it's like a community exposure. If it's a household exposure, we're recommending that people get tested as soon as you know that that household member is positive, and then also maybe a week later. When it's something where it's more general of I was at a big party or I traveled or things like that, about a week later is a reasonable time to check. If you test the day after you traveled or day after you were at a party, that's not going to tell you anything. So I have seen some where people say, well, I was at a wedding, so I just wanted to get tested, and they got tested the day after, 2 days after. It's, that's not going to tell us much about your exposures during that time. So a week after is a good time. Yeah.
And then can you, so you're tested positive, then what happens, procedure wise? I don't know if people have been tested or not before.
So if you test positive, the exposure or the isolation period is different if you're symptomatic or not symptomatic. So if you're symptomatic, we start your isolation on the day 1 of symptoms. So that includes if you start your symptoms after you've tested positive. So say you're asymptomatic, you got tested because you got exposed, you test positive, you get tested on a Saturday and it turns out to be positive and you get symptoms that next Tuesday, we would actually start your isolation that next Tuesday, even though you already tested positive on Saturday. And then it would be 10 days forward from there. If you have symptoms and then get tested, then we start that isolation period at the day 1 of symptoms. So, if you start symptoms on a Wednesday and don't get tested till Friday, we go back to Wednesday to say is day 1. And so then it's a total of 10 days of isolation. They will go back 2 days prior to that positive test or the onset of symptoms for contact tracing. So anybody you were in contact with those 2 days prior to that test or onset of symptoms. And right now, unfortunately, the county health department is so overwhelmed with the number of cases that they're tracking down that they're not able to do contact tracing for the cases that come up. So they can do household contact tracing. They'll call and talk the person through their isolation and arrange for other household members to get tested. But other than that, they're relying on people to contact their own close contacts. And then also deferring to people like Jane who have been helpful in the schools for contact tracing. So the school nurses are doing a lot of contact tracing for local school districts.
Yeah, I get the impression that people are kind of doing their own contact tracing. I mean, that's not really, to expect the government to go through and trace, that'd take forever.
We were tracking down everybody when we had lower numbers. So up until even the end of September, we were able to contact trace every single case that was in the county. But with the numbers that are happening right now, so if we were able to get the numbers back down, then the county would be able to handle that and track everybody down and call all those close contacts and get them arranged for testing. But at this point, it's just not possible with the number of cases.
So I have a question too. So on the same topic, so today's case at the school, so how common or how easy is it to have this happen, that their test was misread? You know what I mean?
So it wasn't, so I don't know how much to say about this, Jane. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
I think it was a true mistake on the party of the positive individual. I think it was an honest mistake. I really do. I
don't think it was the test that was misread. I think it was the results shared with the family that were interpreted incorrectly.
I think so.
Yeah, the way it was displayed, I think in the like my chart system was misread by the person who was receiving the results as it was reported as negative. They thought it said negative, but really it read positive. So actually our clinic staff were calling all of the positive results, happened to call this family and advise the family that it was positive, and they said no, it was negative, and that's where the kind of no, it was positive. And so then by that point, Jane, I think, already had learned about it as well. So yeah, I think it was just looking at a result and seeing the way it was displayed was maybe confusing for the person who was reading the result, the family that was reading the result.
But do you think that is something that could happen more than, you know what I'm saying?
So
like,
I can tell you, Gina, that I've already sent the letter out to the families today, telling them about our positive case, that their
Right.
kids will not be, staff or kids will not be allowed in the building. And like, I was taking people's word for it and in the expectation that they would be sending me the result within the hour. That's not going to be the case anymore. They're not going to come into the building until I have that in my hand. And I've emailed staff saying that they can enter the building. And that goes for siblings too.
So if contact tracing was active in Iowa County, you would have been notified, the school would have been notified as, you know.
No, there's a delay to that. So you can't immediately, I mean, the result came back early this morning. I think it was probably 6 o'clock, right?
And, yeah. And Bob, the county is still reaching out to these people who are positive. They're not just not contacting anybody. Like if they're just not able to, maybe if somebody had 75 close contacts, they may not have the capacity to call all 75 and spend a half hour, 45 minutes with each person giving very clear instruction about what to do, but they're still taking names. They're still doing their best to reach out to people. And I'm helping, reach out to anybody and give clear instructions, for anybody in the school district, teacher or staff.
And eventually,
so they are still reaching out to people, but it's, if it comes on my chart at 5 a.m., they're not in their office until later.
Eventually you would probably be contacted though. In this case, it might be a few days later, but eventually the county would have
contacted. The county probably would have called her later
her
today. Like it would have been today. Not.
Okay.
I mean, usually I know when I pretty much always know when a person is being tested, and I know to watch for it the next day or 2 days later. And the families are always really good about, letting me know we've got results, they're in or they're not in yet, but we'll call you as soon as we do. It was just, I think it was a fluke. It was an accident, mistake.
Can I ask, this is kind of related to tracing, but also putting kids in school more full-time, but I think Jane, you probably have some input on it, maybe more than others. But if the high school, maybe and the middle school, but the high school, if they went full virtual, which would free up the classrooms in the high school, which could move elementary school classes to the high school. So let's say that you have enough room for the elementary school. Would that still be, would there be a problem with having K through 5, 4 days a week then? Because I mean, that's assuming that space is not a limitation. So what other challenges are we looking at? We're talking cohorts of 8. Would there be a trait? Go ahead.
If you're asking me, as long as they're staying in their class sizes, I just don't know if we have the staff or I don't know. I think that would be more of a principal and building wise, space wise thing. If they're able to stay in the same group size where we're limiting, number of students, doing 6 feet apart and masking, everything, I don't see a problem with that, but I just don't know how viable it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at more from the spread. I mean, Sarah, maybe, I mean, from you and Sarah kind of are more in tune with the spread and the risk and the potential issues that you'd have with something like that. So I don't know if that's even a solution or not.
The other thing that will come up that we've been very fortunate with is that with having, say, elementary school kids only there 2 days a week, if somebody tests positive on Friday and you only have to contact trace back to Wednesday, then you don't have any people at school that were close contact.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that comes up with that. So it's not necessarily, it will put people at potential risk of being close contacts a little bit more because you're just in contact with each other more. And so there's less of this delay between somebody gets symptoms, gets tested, we get the result back, we figure out when to contact trace, and they haven't been in the building. So that would be the thing that would change a little bit.
There'd be more likelihood of a 2-week quarantine for cohorts.
For classrooms, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And Bob, if you run the numbers, so if you just think about the classroom or contact hours that people would have with one another, you're essentially doubling or more the contact time. So as we still have, widespread community spread, you're kind of asking for more chance of having to quarantine cohorts of people. So it's just kind of simple math there.
That brings up another question too, is if somebody's positive in a cohort, so the other classmates have to quarantine, right? But they're not positive. So do you contact trace on the relationships of the quarantined kids too then? How far down does the quarantine? Because you're not tracing that.
Close contact. No.
Okay.
So the people who have to go home, or the people who are directly affected, the close contacts, they are the only ones who have to then go home and quarantine as best they can from their families. But anybody else would, that comes into contact with a close contact is considered a contact of a close contact. So it's like the next level out. So no, they do not have to isolate, but everybody who's identified as a close contact, when they go home and do their best to quarantine from the rest of their family, everybody in that household should monitor for symptoms. It's a good idea, depending on the individual circumstances, it's a good idea to test the close contact at a certain point. And then especially if anybody in the household were to exhibit symptoms, then contact your provider or me to determine who else should be tested and at what point.
So a second grade class, let's say a kid in a second grade cohort gets it, and you basically tell all the kids to quarantine, your tracing kind of stops there, right? I mean, because you're tracing in the school contact, or do you trace outside the school?
I will, if people want help with that, I will. I do offer to help contact people who are not staff or students. But right, and until someone else becomes a positive, I wouldn't go beyond the close contacts.
Marsha?
Right.
Yeah, I'm kind of going off subject here, but what we've been talking about. But you mentioned earlier that some of the students or families are moving their kids to Belmont, and Belmont is doing full-time schooling. Why is Belmont not having any problems with the virus, or have they closed before? Or, I mean, why would they? I'm just curious. I mean, it's such a stark difference between other communities that are going totally virtual and us trying to do hybrid. Why is Belmont getting away with doing full time?
Belmont has a much smaller student population. They have had grades or classrooms that have had to go virtual. They went virtual as an entire district and have come back. And I do know that they are at least one classroom, potentially two, that are now back to 100% virtual. But basically on the size of the classes themselves, they're able to do all of the social distancing and masking and things and still bring their entire population back in. I know Highland is another school district in Iowa County that's similar. Their student population is such that they could have all of the second graders in one room and still maintain the 6 feet social distancing and wear masks and all those kinds of.
Got it.
A
Got
lot
it.
of the
Thank you.
smaller districts are able to bring more students back. And in some of these cases, they can bring all of their students back and still try to maintain all those guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob, to your other question, yes, you can easily switch from the hybrid to virtual, because, and Jane is shooting out emails quite a bit right now saying, hey, this student is going to be attending virtually until further notice. And then maybe 2 days later, they get in the hospital, the negative test result, and now they're able to come back into the building immediately. So, I mean, those things are happening quite frequently on a day-to-day basis.
And I know all of us have so much spare time. There are free contact tracing courses that are available through many public health schools, medical schools. So I'm happy to provide that link to anyone who has some free time. I think, Jane, you're doing an incredible and Herculean job with all of this. All right, I will move to recommendations on the hybrid model. So this was recommended by a board member, and maybe Mitch, you could provide some more context.
The board member wanted to know what the committee felt or how the committee felt about the hybrid model. Is it working? Is it not working? Concerns over the fact that we did have to shut down. Does that mean this hybrid doesn't work and we should try something else? So should we be jumping to phase 2? Should we just bring everybody back in and, do what some of the other districts are doing? You're in, then you're out for 2 weeks and then you're back in, so just what does the committee feel about the current hybrid model and make recommendations off of that?
I would say that we've had to close the district once. And other than that, it was classroom or a few individuals here and there. So I would say it's working. I don't think that it is impermeable. If all the right terrible circumstances happen to happen all at once, I don't want to say we're guaranteed to stay open forever, without any, unfortunate series of events. But I do feel that it was working very well. And I feel like if you bring everybody back, like if that's the alternative, we're not going to be able to maintain our health guidelines. So it's two very different things that we're talking about. It's not as simple as we'll just bring everybody back because Belmont's doing it. They have different circumstances when we do. We did last the longest. We only had to close down once. It's not 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, back and forth. It was one time so far. I think that's working.
Mm-hmm.
I would just second what Jane said. I mean, it clearly that I don't think anything indicates that we should be sending kids to school more at this point, certainly. So it seems like if anything, there must be, then this is what it could be, given the limitations we have.
And I guess I do want to clarify what I'm saying, because I know that everyone's not 100% satisfied. So I will say that it's working in that we are able to isolate and stop the spread in the school. Health-wise, community-wise, coronavirus pandemic-wise, what we're doing is working. There are always going to be room for improvement for the education part. And I don't think we should ever stop trying to improve that. And so any constructive criticism on how we can make it better, I'm not a teacher, but if anybody has some constructive feedback, I think that we should be open to that and invite people to send emails to us. I've not had anybody contact me regarding this committee. So if anybody has ideas, that they would like presented, I would be happy to share them with teachers at any level.
When the district was shut down and we were in the hybrid, did the report card indicate that we should shut down? I mean, I think we were shut down due to other circumstances of the number of cases in the district, wasn't it? I mean, wasn't that the bulk of the concern? I don't know if that's in the report card. I don't think it is.
our score became a 2 on 10-12 and has maintained that.
And what was, is that when it was shut down, 10-12? I'm not sure what the dates.
Yes.
Yep, that was our last day of any face-to-face instruction. The next day was a day for teachers to try to get materials together. I know there was a large pickup at the elementary parking lot of materials and supplies for the upcoming week and a half, but then we started on the 100% virtual on the third.
Okay, and I think that was the same night that the report card was adopted too. I mean, a lot of stuff happened that Monday night, I think.
Yeah.
But there's also recommendations to shut down before report card was even, known. I think it was, a lot of it was due to the number of cases in the district too, wasn't it? I mean, staff and students are kind of like to tamp that down was kind of the idea, or?
That is correct. Yes. I mean, the report card was showing virtual and then there were, when you look at that line item number 2 there, look at active cases, we had them, and it warranted us moving to 100% virtual as well.
I had a question that's not answering it's not answering the question that was asked by the board member, but it's sort of tangentially related, which is that since we went back to the hybrid model while the report card was at a 2, did the school board give an indication of what metrics they are looking for to indicate when to go all virtual? Because, it wasn't the report card, apparently.
Well, part of the reason, again, comes back to what Bob had said. If you look inside the building, the report card doesn't just indicate what's happening in Mineral Point either. It takes into the consideration the countywide data. There are things that we can look at that get a little more specific to the Mineral Point census tract. We were informed that there were 11 active outbreaks, and 6 of those active outbreaks were in the Mineral Point school district, I'll say. And then when you went the step further, there were factors inside the building that just prevented us from being able to continue in our hybrid model. So we needed to go virtual. At the time then, when the recommendation was made to return to the hybrid, the conditions inside, looking at those active cases, the conditions inside the district had changed. And we were able to provide the support we needed for the hybrid. While again, the factors on the outside, the data on the outside still is, boy, you should really look at, staying in that virtual mode. But when the school district asked repeatedly, I try to protect the privacy rights of staff members and students alike. And just, again, I know people probably think, well, he's covering up something. He's not being truthful. He's not being transparent, but I'm trying to respect all of those people involved. The issues that forced us to go virtual inside the district were no longer in place. Those were no longer factors for us as we were looking at what to do inside the building.
Are those factors that should be
So the metrics that
added on the report card, the number of internal cases?
Well, it is. If you look at that sheet that Annika had up, 1 was the report card score, 2 was active cases.
Oh, that's active cases inside Mineral Point schools? Is that what that
Yes.
saying specifically? And that's not in the metrics though, the 1, 2, and 3. Those are additional variables you look at. Yeah,
Right,
one would be the metric.
Yeah, so these were the caveats that
Okay, all right.
if I recall, I think you were part of that discussion of adding that as a caveat, looking at what's in the school.
So the additional metrics that the school board is looking at are conditions in the school, which obviously after we've not been at school are going to be looking very good. So how often are they going to be revisiting that kind of data? Will that data just be the number of cases that are active inside the school? Or are they also looking at how many outbreaks there are in the community? Because it sounded like at the start of the last shutdown, that was a large part of what helped like make that decision for them.
Well, I think I don't want to speak for them. I work for them, but I'm not speaking for them. But if you know, we're in this bad situation now. But if the numbers were 7 and 8 for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and we had the same conditions happen inside the building, I don't think the district wants to be tied to the fact that, well, we can't go virtual because if you look at the report card score, it's a 7 and an 8, and it has been that way for 3 straight weeks. We should be in phase 2, but inside the building, we're dealing with our own outbreak. We've got, I don't know how accurate it is, but I had heard Dodgeville has 6 staff members that had tested positive. If Mineral Point had 6 staff members that tested positive, but the report card score was a 7 or 8, I would like to think that somebody would look at me and say, boy, that was a great decision that you went 100% virtual, even though the report card score was a 7 or an 8.
Mhm.
So, they're not, I don't think anyone is saying that the collective intelligence of this group is to be ignored, but I think there are other factors that do come into play in some of the decisions that are being made, and I don't want people to feel like, well, it's a waste of time for me to be a part of this, because I think it's very important that as community members, we can help spread, you can help spread the facts of what's going on, and how that this helps formulate decisions or helps add to decisions. And, sometimes quite honestly, you can say, hey, this was our recommendation. They chose to go the opposite direction, and look at what happened to them. They're a bunch of idiots, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I understand that it's going to be used as a guideline. I was just curious what other metrics they were communicating that were important to them, so that we could be also kind of on the same page as them as we're kind of evaluating the situation.
Right. No, I get that. They did not share. We want this to be added to the metrics. We want this, people to track this data as well. I think they're what's happening in the building and what's not happening in the building. I know, Marcia, you had your hand up again.
I might have. So do you want us to give an opinion about what to do as far as the hybrid? Because if with all the holidays coming up and with the increase of cases in the community and with the lack of cooperation from the community, I don't see how we can go full time in the near future. And if the virtual is working and the hybrid is working, then I would say continue doing that. Is that what you're looking for from us for number 3?
I would say yes. I would say at the next school board meeting, again, provide the most up-to-date report card information based on, we'll get the data Friday. So, it might not be as hectic to try to update the report card for a Monday board meeting, but then, what is the committee's recommendation? Is the committee's recommendation to say we, all of the data that we have, all of the information we've taken in, that the hybrid model is working and we continue to support it, to Annika's question, around the holidays, or, as a committee, do you wish to make a recommendation that says you may want to consider looking at what's going to happen? Thanksgiving is going to be here. Mineral Point still has several very large families. So if you're having a large family gathering, does it make sense for the Mineral Point district to look at transitioning to virtual coming out of that that opportunity to try to slow the spread or slow the potential spread into the building. It's things that the school board may wish to consider at that point in time. Again, trying to be a little bit more proactive around, because 3 weeks later it's Christmas vacation, and then what's going to happen at Christmas vacation? Kids are off for 2 weeks and not quite week and a half. What's going to happen? We're going to get together and on mom's side of the family on this day, then we're going to go to dad's side of the family on that day, and then we'll have our own Christmas. And my brother and sister are back from college, and did they bring any unwanted presents from college when they come back home? So, do you wish to make a recommendation to the board to be proactively thinking about these opportunities for potential spread that come out?
I think just mentioning that's something that they should consider, or something that they should think about. Just bringing it up to them, whether the data as far as number of cases in the school district, I don't think that's public. I don't know if you want to make it public or not either. But in the scorecard or report card, that's a factor as well. When I saw that things went virtual, I was kind of thinking, well, did everything kind of collapse the plan? But things happened over that weekend that got bad. But the other factor is all the cases in the school, I think, was the biggest factor that caused, I don't know how the vote was in the board, but I think most board members were okay with shutting down for 2 weeks because it was an obvious problem. But the Thanksgiving thing, I think that's worth a discussion, maybe to have them think about, like what you just said, Mitch, with visiting family, that type of thing. I know a lot of people aren't doing Thanksgiving too, though, just because they don't want to spread it. So it's not like everybody would be in the same boat, but I'm sure there's a number of them that would be.
And I think we
Marsha?
also have to think about, it's not just about not having it come back to the school, but if we can potentially have kids not in school for the couple of weeks ahead of time, not mixing that way, they could potentially be less of a risk to their family members if they are gathering for those family events. So in terms of risk to the community of the schools being open, if we can have kind of a washout period before the holiday, that might actually be more impactful than a washout period after the holiday on our community numbers. Like Mitch said, there are a lot of colleges that are saying, from Thanksgiving through Christmas, there won't be any in-person, and that would be a pretty reasonable way to try to mitigate that risk locally and be proactive about it. So it's not like we're shutting down because things are so bad, but we're shutting down to virtual because we want to try to protect our community, and we want people to try to be safe. I don't know if that'll encourage more of the mixing and mingling that we're trying to discourage. That's another possible risk there. But then the other thing that I guess I'll ask Mitch is, the scorecard is something that or our report card is something that's very objective, where you can say the number and this is where it's at. The number of cases and things like that, the school board is not going to be apprised of those details. It's really going to be more of you and Jane might know the overall situation, but not many other people may. So it's really going to be more of an admin judgment call. So is there any potential of the admin judgment call being something that you do not need to have board approval for to shut down to virtual? Because if you need to, tomorrow shut down the school, do you need to emergently have a quorum of the board to make that approval? Or can you say, no, based on the situation right now, this needs to happen. We cannot come to school tomorrow.
This meeting's recorded, right?
I'm just trying to advocate for admin having the power to make the decisions that they need to make.
I have asked the board members to support that plan of attack, that working with Jane and the admin team and making the recommendation that, it might be a Tuesday. And, if Jane were to come to me and say, I've got 2 cases in the high school, 1 in the middle and 3 in the elementary. Yeah, I think we need to go virtual. I've asked for that support. I've not heard back, but from one board member who says, I think that makes good sense that you go that way. So, it may be a time where the superintendent of the Mineral Point School District will be asking for forgiveness and not permission anymore, because I do believe there will probably be a time when that has to happen. That I just, I said I will certainly inform the board that this is what we're meeting to discuss this, and we believe that this is going to be the direction we're going. I'll keep you informed, and then meet with the admin team and Jane and pull in all of that information and make the recommendation so that, teachers aren't scrambling. My wife had a half an hour yesterday to prepare all of her kindergarten students with a month's worth of supplies to take home. And she had to gather a month's worth of teaching supplies to bring home. And I will certainly try not to ever do that to any of my staff members. I want them to at least have enough time to say, hey, you know what, we're going to make it through today, but at the end of the day, we're going virtual. So you're going to want to plan to, what you need to make sure that this group of students has to go home, and we can make copies so that if we have to have a day off tomorrow for parent pickup for the other cohorts, that's the direction I'm going, that it will become a recommendation coming from the admin team and an internal decision and not require a board meeting.
Perhaps this committee could make a recommendation not to exactly do what you said, Sarah, to give permission. This made Mitch laugh, which I guess there would be some problem there. You only heard back from one board member. Perhaps instead we ask them to go through the thought exercise of, if we did need to shut down quickly, what do they see that looking like? How does the board expect to respond quickly if they do not want to give that kind of allowance to the administration? So at least they're contemplating what that might look like if that happens. And so we're not caught flat-footed, to your point about your wife last night. Definitely don't want that.
Right. No, and I will continue to try to keep that topic in front of the board. I do a weekly update. So tomorrow will be another one of those updates, and I will put that back out there, and I will just continue to share that there are going to be times when decisions need to be made that don't allow for the wait time for a board meeting, whether it's I need 3 hours for 4 guys to be able to drive in to the school to have a meeting or to join me on a Zoom meeting. And, there's decisions that are going to need to be made, and they're going to need to be made quickly to allow for the easiest transition from the hybrid to the virtual. So.
But if the concern is that might be happening because of the holidays, et cetera, then going back to what Dr. Fox said, would it make sense to go virtual the week before Thanksgiving and continue until after Thanksgiving, until through the holidays? Is that just is that just too much of a problem for people?
I think, you have parents here that could speak to it, but I think the more advanced warning you can give, the better it is, because people have the opportunity to make plans. It's easier to say, hey, it looks like tomorrow's going to be just a tremendously terrible weather day. We're calling school off now. That's certainly easier for parents to go to their plan B for a snow day or whatever this may be. So if the committee would like, I can put that in my update saying that this is something that the committee would like the board to consider, and I can send that out to them tomorrow. The next board meeting is the 9th of November, so not next week, the week after. And if the committee then brings it up again, that's still 2 weeks prior to Thanksgiving. So that would give some time for a decision to be made and still give families enough time, advance notice to say, yeah, the board has decided this makes great sense to be proactive. And we think it would be in our best interest, even if they say we're going to go virtual for the Monday and Tuesday prior to Thanksgiving, Wednesday through Fridays off, so it would at least get that thought on their radar.
I think going virtual, to me, it doesn't affect me or Chloe too much, our family. because she's older, more independent. And I think most people on this board don't have a problem with going virtual either, but some of the people that do have a problem aren't really represented in this group, I don't think. You know, the people that have a big issue with the jobs and the kids and that type of stuff. That's my only concern. And obviously we have to be concerned with the community, which includes them and how they're being put out as well. But and maybe you guys can, and maybe there's none of them now. Maybe everybody has the problems figured out, or they enrolled somewhere else, and maybe it's not a big deal. But as far as going virtual, to me, I can't really speak to, you know, since it doesn't affect me, and I think it doesn't affect probably half the people in this group, maybe more adversely at all, to go virtual. You know, I can't really, and I think that's more up to the board members to determine the rest of the community. How does it affect them negatively? And they probably have feedback from that too. But so I personally don't have a problem going through with it. It's just, how does it affect other people that I don't know about? But Mitch, I think if you talk to the board, I think they can come up with something where, you know, I'll give you 2 hours to do a Zoom. People have their cell phones, call in or whatever. And I'll apprise you the situation and, you know, let you know that we have to shut down. But a lot of times, if you just talk to the board president, it seems like that's enough to just pull the trigger and not talk to anybody else if it's a fast acting thing.
Right. And I've done that. I've done that in the past.
So is this something that if we want to make that kind of recommendation to just proactively have that, you know, thought exercise, do we need to vote on that? Or how do we kind of make that a recommendation that the board think about having a washout or a period before Thanksgiving, potentially after, and to be proactive? Is that something we should vote on, or just because it's an update?
I think it's a good idea to do it. I mean, if you want to vote on it, you could, but.
Okay. So does that statement then sound okay, that we would ask the school board to be proactive and have a thought exercise around having a week before as well as after Thanksgiving to be virtual? Does that sound like a good statement to think about it, to be proactive?
Yeah, I think just tell them to consider that option. I mean, the benefit that we have, board members can't be in meetings all the time. So this group helps hash out some of the deals, the things that they can't hash out themselves because of limited amount of time. But I think that is something that that can come of this, is to consider those options.
All right, so if everyone is in favor of that, raise your hand. Anyone? Okay. Good. Okay.
And I just one thing, I'm not in favor of it, but along Bob's lines too. I wonder, like, for the families that do work and have young kids that can't stay at home, you know, so we do this washout period, but then they end up in daycares, you know what I mean? They end up in daycares together that aren't with their cohorts. I mean, it's just one of those things. I think the benefit has to outweigh the, you know what I mean? Like, it's just hard because those people that are working full time are going to need daycare. They're going to need to make plans, like Mitch said.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not so easy for them to.
Yeah, what about, but wouldn't they be in daycare on those hybrid, like the virtual days as it is? Because they're only in school a few days?
Or it could be with a grandparent or a different relative.
But, right, so how would that change?
Well, like, for instance, like the pre-K kids and the kindergarten, they go 4 days a week, half days. So if all of a sudden everybody's virtual, that would change.
But where are they the other half of the day? Like, who are they with? Because then they would just be with those people the full day, maybe?
Yeah.
Isn't it more exposure time?
it doesn't affect me personally, but yeah, I do know people that it does. And I guess it just depends on that situation. I think,
Mhm.
and maybe I'm wrong, but I think like the school board would probably want an explanation or to know that the decision we're making is going to benefit most of the people and that there's a reason, you know what I'm saying? I guess that.
I mean, but yeah, that's like the inherent problem with all of this stuff is that if you do enough, it'll look like too much when you're doing it. So it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
do we know for sure that we'll be saving time in person after Thanksgiving if we give out this wash period? Like, we don't know that 100% for sure,
Right.
but
Right. There's no right answer. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you.
Mhm.
it's like so hard.
The other
Yeah.
thing that there could potentially be kids where they don't overlap at daycare. Like if they're a Monday, Tuesday, and then there's other kids at that daycare that go there Thursday, Friday, this could potentially be that those kids are mixing. So that would be one place that you might see more overlap with cohorts and things like that. The other thing though is that Jane brought up a really good point this last week, that when school is in session, she is kind of overseeing and an arbiter of who can come to school, who can, you should get tested. Do you have what symptom? Who in your family has it? How long do you have to be off? And when school is out, she doesn't have that kind of like overarching look at the district to really know how much disease is out there. And so, there is a potential that having school open may actually improve the monitoring of our local system, because there are more of those situations that are brought to her attention that she then has to kind of decide, can they come to school? Can they not? Do they need to be tested? So that's just the other kind of caveat to all of this, is that when school's not in session and these families aren't pressed to say you either need to be seen or have a test before you can come back, we may be missing a fair amount of disease that's circulating out there, and then that could contribute to higher community levels as well. So it's not a simple black and white, schools open equals dangerous, schools closed equals safe. It's really more of a nuance of what are the different factors that are going into our local situation and our situation within the schools, and how can we best serve both the community at large and our students and teachers. So I think it is a good to task them with, you should consider this as a potential plan. But there are certainly, there's no, if anybody knew how to do this 100%, we would all be doing it in the same way. And there just isn't any one right way to do this. And we're all building the plane as we're flying it, and we're flying a million different types of planes right now. So we just have to kind of do the best we can with the information that we have right now.
So what do you think, Sarah? From what you just said, does it make sense to do the shutdown before and after? I mean,
I think
not
it
an
does.
extended period of time, but a shorter period of time like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably does unless the local situation changes dramatically in the next 4 weeks, where all of a sudden our community levels fall and we're just in, back where we were in September and, when school first started. If our community levels were to fall to that, then maybe we don't have to do something like that. But where our state levels are right now, the idea of having kids go to grandma's for Thanksgiving and then come back to school on Monday just gives me, Jane is her entire job from Thanksgiving through Christmas is going to be contact tracing and excluding people and trying to put out fires, rather than maybe we can prevent a fire of a large scale outbreak in our area.
And you said that the next school board meeting where we would present this idea to think about this would be on November 9th. Is that correct? So by that time, I'm expecting, watching the exponential growth that's been happening, that the numbers would maybe even be more indicative, perhaps, to your point, Sarah, than less indicative, and that can be a part of the evaluation that they're doing at that time.
I would like to tread extremely light when we present this, because I think they were there are people who are so unhappy to have to close when we were in a crisis mode. And if we tell them we're going to do it because we're trying to be proactive, that's not going to be enough to convince anybody. I am also extremely nervous about having students out over the holidays. I'm already seeing so many situations where people are keeping their kids home, not telling me why. I'm chasing them down, trying to figure out, oh, well, it's because they were exposed. Okay, but I need the details so I can give you the appropriate return date. I am struggling really hard this week because we were out for the last 2 weeks. And I still agree that we did the right thing when we did, but it really makes me nervous to close before we're forced to because of what's happening. I do totally 100% understand the science behind it. I understand the idea of it. It's people's compliance with it and the compliance when they come back. And it makes me nervous. And that's all I just had to share.
So that's kind of what Sarah was talking about as far as having Jane, the COVID cop, is not enforcing anything when everybody's out of school and virtual. Like last 2 weeks, you probably didn't have a lot of interacting, but when they are in school, then somebody coughs, sniffles, whatever, you need to get tested, check that out.
Right.
So
No,
when they're not there, it's not happening in daycares probably. I mean,
Well,
not to the extent of the school.
Yeah, I had very little feedback from families, very little reaching out to me to report symptoms. Now, COVID didn't slow down when we were closed in the community. It continued. And so it would be pretty rare that it didn't affect any families or staff, you know, just because they weren't in school. That would be pretty interesting. So for me to have not heard any phone calls about, you know, I have this, my dad has this, my cousin has this, we were here, we were there, should we get tested, to have nobody reach out and ask me any advice on what they need to do when we're closed for 2 weeks. And now I'm being bombarded with so many families who shouldn't be in the school for one reason or another. It just makes me nervous. Sorry, I know I already said that already. I think we need to, I mean, my letter today did emphasize the importance of communication, honesty, you know, working with the school to make sure that we're all on the same page and following the guidelines. But I would need to make sure that every family really understands what it means to be off for 2 weeks proactively, and what it means, what has to happen before you can come back.
So when they do come back after Thanksgiving, after this 2-week quarantine or whatever, virtual, then you're going to have your hands full even more than now. I mean, because there's a lot more potential exposure over that period of time.
Well, and I don't want to make it all about me, because it's about the students and the community.
I mean, the
as well.
school is going to be exposed to it more, I should say.
Right, but I want to make sure that what we're doing is going to actually help the community. So if we're going to close because I want to make sure that is that actually going to help, or is it going to make it worse because nobody has anyone to answer to, and they can go out and about and not worry about, you know, nobody's monitoring me this week or the next 2 weeks, so why bother staying home?
I agree.
But I do understand the reason, you know, the idea behind it. So I'm not like discounting that.
I guess that, you know, as far as our action item goes, that this was obviously a conversation that brought up a lot of different points of view, a lot of different elements. I mean, just the idea of transitions not being the best. It sounds like that's not just academic, like that's also an experience that we're having for you, Jane, with regard to tracking. I wonder if it would just be worth recommending, just saying we had a very fulsome conversation about this, and it would be worth recommending that they also have this conversation, because there is a lot going on, and it's not maybe just going to be Thanksgiving. There might be other times in the future where these same kind of topics are going to come up.
Yeah.
Can I recommend one? I mean, you know, the thing that's in the back of my mind all the time are these families that are being really affected adversely because they're not in school full time. But I don't know what number that is. And I know we did a survey before, like who wants to be full time, who doesn't, that type of stuff. But that didn't really get to the point of, you know, how is this affecting you? You know, did you have to change jobs? Did you have to quit a job? You have to change shift? You know, is it really, really adversely, if there's a scale that we could send a survey out or something just to find out who those people are. I don't know if
At this
Mitch would
point,
have
are we
insight
gonna,
into that.
well, at this point, are we gonna change? So would that feedback even,
Well, I think that's,
we're not gonna bring people back full time because, I mean, we're in virtual now. So do we really need to send another survey to say, how's it going? Do you have to make major life changes? If they had to, they would have made them by now. So I don't
Right,
know that
but-
collecting that information is gonna be helpful moving forward.
but the resistance that you're seeing on the school board is because of just that. I mean, if they were at ease that there isn't a lot of adversity due to not being in person, then their resistance to some of these things wouldn't be as extreme. And I'm guessing maybe some of these school board members, I mean, they're well known in the community, maybe they have had numerous phone calls from people saying, why aren't we in person? But I don't know if they know it to the extent of the issues that they have. You know what I mean?
Will
I know
getting
what
that
you're saying as
feedback,
far as,
okay,
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I mean, I guess any surveys we send out, I want it to be geared towards decisions that we're actually going to make. And if we ask a bunch of people, are you still unhappy with your home situation due to the virtual model? It's not going to be helpful. It's going to be almost like rubbing it in their face. Like, well, we're not changing it. So
right, but
sorry.
but the high school can go full virtual, middle school can go full virtual, elementary school could move in there and go 4 days a week. I mean, there is
I see what you're saying.
things that can be done, but there's kind of mountainous things that can be done. But we don't know the extent of the issues that people are having in the community. If there's a lot of them and we know that, we can validate that, then mountains can be moved. But if everybody seems like in this committee, most people are like, yeah, it's fine, it's okay. But we don't know, the people that are out there that are really going through a hard time. And that's kind of my concern. Like I would lighten up. I'd be like, yeah, okay, let's just go virtual all the time. I'm fine with that. But I know other people aren't in my same situation. So that's, and maybe a survey is the wrong way of doing it too. Maybe just getting some other form of feedback. I'm sure teachers probably heard, or maybe administrators, principals.
And I think too, back to your point, Bob, too, I think there's other things with the school board. There's other issues that have come up. Sports was kind of a hot button. Like, if we can play sports, how come we can't go to school? I mean, there's just a lot of inconsistency with it. And so I think that some of the complaints that the school board is hearing, and even ones that I have heard, is just that, like, there's sports going on, they're gathering, even when they're, when they say they won't practice, they just move their practice. I mean, it's difficult, but I think there's a lot of other things that are playing into them being not 100% convinced that this is just for safety. Does that make sense?
That the shutdown would be for safety, you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, our job is obviously to get the kids back in school. Everybody wants that. We just know that we can't do that right now. It doesn't make sense to do that right now. But I think, like, when Jane said she's nervous about presenting this idea to the school, I just think there's a lot of things that are going on that, like the idea that, okay, we can play sports, we can do this, we can do that, but we can't go to school full time. I think that's the idea. It's
so, like, the parents that are really being put out, elementary school kids, they're saying, well, my kids can't go to school 4 days a week, but you guys can have your sports. So therefore it's not really as bad as what you're saying it is. Is that kind of what you're?
I mean, I do think that's a perception.
Yeah, I believe that.
I know this.
I think it goes beyond the school district. I think with the data and the numbers that we get, I know it's all from HIPAA, everything has to be secret about who has what, when they had it. But basically you get gender, you get age. That's pretty much it. Maybe race if you're lucky. So we don't know the condition. We don't know the pre-existing conditions that they have. We don't know, like, unless you had a firsthand experience, you don't really know because there are no anecdotals. I mean, there's a couple anecdotal things about, a fifth grader had it, down in Alabama or something. But as far as in this community, unless you personally know a person, you can't really know, how severe this is or can be. And I think
Right.
it's because we're so insulated from it.
And I'm curious about, like, for example, I know Mitch explained the whole Belmont thing and how small their school is, and you have to be able to compare apples to apples. There's different circumstances, but like St. Joe's, for example, they don't have the same public guidelines that Dodgeville School would have. As far as I know, I think they're going 5 days a week. You know what I mean? It makes me wonder, like, with the community spread and what is going on over there, how it's going to affect them. I haven't really heard anything. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a different way of going about it than we do. Probably different leaders making those decisions.
And
And
also, the parents, the community of St. Joe's may be a lot different than just the general community out there. And I mean, that could be a factor too. So,
But they have pretty small class sizes as well.
yeah.
Okay,
I think
so
to
I
both
think we
Bob's
have,
and Gina's, sorry, go ahead, Anka.
no, it's okay.
To both Bob's and Gina's point, I think what they're saying is in this community, the parents that are struggling the most with the virtual are underrepresented. They may not have been when we, at least right now, looking at, we don't, all of us that are on here, I don't see much disagreement on, hey, we can't go 4 days a week and stuff like that. Even though our task is to try to get students back there, I think we're all there. Where we don't have that sounding board of, we need that, we should go 4 days a week. But that's what the board's hearing from the squeaky wheel situation. And that squeaky wheel is still a legit concern because those kids, we need to educate on the virtual side too and educate them as well. And they're the ones that are having the most difficulty. So how do we do that when we choose virtual over hybrid or whatnot? That I think is the bigger problem because the board hears that and their job is to make sure that those students are educated. It's our job to make sure that they're educated. And the ones that are fine with it, you don't hear that much about it because things are smooth with them. Particularly at the high school level, it's typically easier than at the elementary school level as well. I will say while we're on the recommendation of the hybrid, on the educational side of it, the fact that the athletes are now virtual, that portion has substantially, in my opinion, affected greatly at the high school level what we can deliver. This is my schedule, not that you have to see a lot of it, but every blue dot you see, those are athletes that I don't have, that I would have had on a given day. So example would be on Monday morning, first hour I have intro and I have 11 kids in there, but 4 of them will be virtual. Okay, we're building beanbag boards. So either I can't go with those 6 and build the beanbag boards, or I have to find something virtually for them. Where if you were a true virtual kid, I would have an alternative situation that would be ongoing at a different time. So that piece of it has substantially, it's got me concerned on how I'm going to do that long term. Okay, and I'm different than a math teacher, and I'm different than the elementary and stuff like that. I'm giving you, this is just me at this point. So my big concern is with that piece, what does that mean? Because of those 4 kids, one might be a soccer player, one might be a volleyball player, and 2 might be a football player. And they come back at different times too, depending on how the season ends. And then that runs into wrestling and basketball and those kind of things. It's almost like I need to know how long you're virtual to give a scenario where a math teacher might be able to bring you in on a Zoom meeting on a normal time frame and teach you virtually at the same time as in person. So there's a lot more variables with that too, which concerns me greatly under the hybrid model. Even though I'm a huge fan of the hybrid model, this has got me concerned about how much I can deliver educationally as I could.
Even
before.
in virtual, then you wouldn't be able to deliver.
Although I can't deliver obviously the same, right? I can't have them building beanbag boards with me, right? But I would
Right.
plan a project for them, but they don't Zoom in with me. It's not like a math class where, this is the lesson that's happening for you. Your lesson is online that I give to you on Wednesday. Here's what I expect you to do. I Zoom with you at a different time, even though you're in my class that hour, you're not actually there. Does that make sense? So I set up different times to be able to meet with them as needed with different projects that they can do. But when you're now a legit hybrid student, but you're virtual and I don't know when you're coming back and we have projects going on, I can't take away from the in-person kids by not doing the projects out in the shop. So I can't Zoom with you during that time. So I have to set up a different time and then come up with different things. So it's a different animal that has happened that I definitely need something to figure out. I just need to know what's going to happen in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Is that when it's done, or do we do it again? Those kind of things are
Mhm.
eating at me that I don't know.
So I guess a question for Mitch around this recommendation. Are you making it to the school board, or is that something that myself and Justin are sharing? Because we just want to make sure we're capturing everyone's feedback for that next school board meeting, because I think Mr. Carey speaks to the educational component, and I think, Jane's concerns. So we just want to make sure it captures kind of the full picture. And you're muted right now.
I think it would be the recommendation that should come from the committee, and certainly share these different viewpoints as well, saying, these are things that we have rolled around with the committee, based on looking at
Mhm.
how this impacts the education, how will it impact, families that don't necessarily have the daycare available to them. So I think if the committee is comfortable with a recommendation, then it should come from the committee themselves. I was just asking that if that's the recommendation you want to make, I could certainly let the board know in my update tomorrow that, the committee will be talking about some ideas and at least get them to start thinking about it prior to the presentation at the board meeting.
Okay, so the ask is that myself and Justin would be presenting.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I don't think it hurts to run that by the school board. Obviously, they have a lot more feedback than most people do, probably, and have insight into other things that we're not even considering. So,
Mhm.
For us to actually just say, do this is hard, but I think, give them some context of what we've been talking about, give them some feedback, some possibilities of what they could do, and, see if that meshes what they're thinking.
Great. So I know we're coming up on time, so I'm going to get to the next topic, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. So adding another medical voice to the committee, which was also recommended by a board member. So I don't know, Mitch, if you have ideas of who to add. I do have some thoughts just around the fact that we have, a third of the committee are medical in this space. I don't know if we want to get towards 40%, 50% of the committee. And I just want to say healthcare providers. I'm including myself in that. I'm not a provider, but I'm in the public health space, and we are burning out. So we are very tired. And I think having to ask an additional ask of, and I mean, all of you know how much time and energy we put into this, which is remarkable. But to ask an additional person, I think we're reaching a staffing issue in our county, just in our hospitals and clinics. I do have concern over just people having the bandwidth. I'm happy to reach out to people I know, but I just know a lot of people are really exhausted right now.
Can you give us
Understand that.
give us some background on what they're
Yeah.
thinking with that?
Agreed.
This was brought up at the board meeting again, on Monday night, just said, ask the committee, do they think they need another voice, from the medical professions? And actually, Justin had sent out an email today saying, well, there's two medical voices on the board. And then, to Annika's point, there's a lot of medical voices already on the ad hoc committee. And Dr. Dunn had reiterated that while he's not opposed to adding another medical voice, you're all hearing the same information. You're all seeing the same studies and getting the same reports. And there's not really something different that will be brought to the committee. So he was like, if they want to add another doctor, go ahead, add another doctor, but another doctor is just going to come with the same background information, getting the same updates from your sources, so that it isn't really a different voice. It's just going to be another voice that has the same information that's already available to the people on the committee. So I said I would put it on your agenda. So, and I get it. How difficult it is. We look at how difficult it is in teaching, and I'm not necessarily working on trying to save somebody's life every day. I'm trying to keep people safe and trying to provide an education. But, my approach is different, obviously, than anybody in the medical field. So, if the committee is like, yeah, we think we've got good representation right now, we don't need any more, so be it. And I can certainly report that out as well.
I guess I would say it feels almost like a solution without identifying the problem. So I would ask the board what they feel is a deficit or a blind spot or something that's missing from this committee. And then the committee could work to fulfill that need or that deficit in the way that the committee feels works, because I don't really see, to Aaron's point, I don't really see, the information is the information, and I don't know. I just wonder what the why is.
Yeah, and I wonder if they're, if they have a specific thing that they are looking for. If they tell us, I'm certain I can find it.
Yeah, that seems like a better way than to just say, oh, we need a person, but why?
Mm-hmm.
And I can certainly ask that, as a follow-up question.
Yeah, and I would just say, if they're looking for, healthcare status across the county, the DHS dashboard includes, hospitalizations and, I don't know if it drills down to specific health systems, but the updated dashboard has immense amount of data that is publicly available that we can pull from.
You're talking about on the county website?
No, this would be the state.
The state?
Mm-hmm.
So I know the county board, that's only updated once a week, right?
The dashboard is updated once a week.
Yeah, so that seems extremely slow for something that's moving fast. I don't know if they're short on people or what.
They update case counts daily, and then the DHS updates some of those other metrics on a daily basis at 2 p.m. But it's the dashboard is only meant to be a snapshot, so they don't update it daily. They want it to be a little bit more static, so that it's not something that's changing every day.
But so what is updated weekly? That's not daily on the dashboard.
So the weekly is kind of that's the dashboard. So we have the weekly dashboard from the county for the county. Annika's bringing it up here. So the county dashboard for COVID specifically, and then also they have the school dashboard that they update weekly as well. So that's based on, so you can see on what she has listed here of So it's taking the data over a longer period of time. So rather than the daily update that we get of case counts and positives and negatives and deaths that changes from day to day, it's over the last week, what has happened, the number of cases per day over the last 2 weeks, that sort of thing. So it's a little bit more of a trend line rather than something that's going to jump up and down from day to day. So that dashboard, again, they changed it to Fridays because of how the data is getting reported from the state with the update to the infectious disease database that happened last week. The timing of some of their numbers for their total counts had to shift so that Friday is a more reasonable time to do it so that they have a full 2 weeks of data for that rather than having something that kind of breaks up over the weekend.
So the county gets their data from the state and the state gets their data from the county hospitals?
No, not quite. It's so all of the testing goes into a database that is accessible by both the state and the county. So they're all looking at the same information, but reporting it in 2 different ways, if that makes sense.
Okay. I mean, it just seemed like we were kind of caught flat-footed on October 12th when they decided to shut down because suddenly this tidal wave of cases appeared. And maybe we weren't, I mean, Sarah, you'd probably have the inside track on it too and know daily what's happening. But when I looked at the county website, you guys knew there was an issue on the 12th, but I think it was probably the 14th or 15th before that weekly thing became updated. So it seems like if we want to move quickly, we need data that moves quickly to help us judge that. I mean, now it looks like.
Yeah. So, Annika, can you go back to the trend line on the report card part? Because the advantage to this is it actually, so if you look at the numbers from the 28th and the 5th, where there are 3, you can see things trending in the wrong direction. So you can see that percent positivity, you can see that trending up there. You can see the number of cases rising, those cases per day. So you can actually use this and trend it over time and see those patterns start to arise. And then you just have to make a cutoff for, when are we going to look at this and what is our cutoff? So we decided on it's a Monday, which actually makes more sense because then we have the data from the prior Friday rather than something where we're suddenly deciding on Monday that our data from today is too bad for us to go to school tomorrow. It gives us a little bit of time over the weekend to kind of analyze the data and see where we're at. But it's actually an early warning system. So, the numbers in the county in terms of the school dashboard, their numbers have trended in the worst direction over the last month, and but it's hard to use that as an objective measure because some of those it's a red dot or a green dot or a yellow dot, but what do you do with that? So that's where this score kind of makes it a little bit more like, here's a number and you can use that to judge what you're going to do. But this system and the system that we're using to track things at the hospital are more of an early warning system where you actually can see trends happening before it really is apparent that, there's a big surge coming. You can have one day where there's a huge number of cases and that doesn't mean you're in a surge. So it's hard to look at those numbers and say, okay, what's actually happening here? And so these trends over time actually give us a little bit more usable data with that.
Like a 7-day rolling average would be like a daily update of a 7-day average is kind of a more up to date.
So we are tracking that at at the hospital level. We're tracking those on a more rolling basis, and they are following the same patterns that it is a little bit earlier warning system, but again, I'm not sure that we're going to make decisions on the school level based on those early warning signs. It's really going to be more, okay, the general county information is really just one piece, and then what's happening in the school is maybe a more salient piece for that. Yeah.
I mean, as far as somebody that's not involved in the school, the county is pretty much what they have.
Yeah, so the state, if people are interested in it, I can share the website where the state data is posted and the county level data is posted on a daily basis, and they have trend lines and things like that. I look at it about every day. Every day or two, I'll look at the different graphs and kind of just see where we're at, especially on the weekends, because we don't get daily updates on the weekends of case numbers. So we get a Monday count of from Friday through Monday, but you can look at the state data and actually see what the case count is over the weekend if you're interested. And so, you know, if you're interested in looking at that, there is a ton of data, and it's all publicly available, and it's really interesting to look at those trends.
So is that linked from the Iowa County Health?
They do
Department
have a
too, or-
link, I think, to so it's the DH. If you look up, just Google Wisconsin DHS.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I could
DHS
probably
is
Google it.
again Department of Health Services, not Dodgeville High School. And it then, if you put COVID, then it'll take you to that COVID landing page.
Okay.
They're also reporting on that page now the number of people that are admitted to that field hospital, which is interesting to see, and those regional numbers for hospital capacity and ICU and all of that. There's a ton of data.
I guess a person would assume that the county health department would have more localized data than the state, but it seems it's the other way around.
It's all the same data. So they're all getting the same data.
Well, one's
They're just
updated daily,
reporting it
one's
in a
up.
different way.
Yeah, the county's updated once a week, state's updated daily. So
No, they have a daily update on the county health webpage, so you can actually look at current case count, and that's the most recent at 2 p.m. It's updated every day, and it's posted every day, and it's right on the Iowa County website for COVID.
But you said the state has more data.
The state
county.
is tracking more data on a day-to-day basis. So you can see more graphs and things like that. On the weekends, the case counts, the case positivity is only reported on the county website once a week, but the case counts are something you can look at daily.
On the state site.
On the county site, but then on the state site, you can look at it over the weekend. So that's the big difference is the weekend numbers. You'd have to look at the state site. You also, if you want to compare county to county, so you can compare Lafayette County to Iowa County to Grant County, which I do daily. And then also on the other place I look for this is on the New York Times website and on the Guardian website. They have daily case counts for the county, and they have trend lines and, you know, number per 100,000 and things like that. So you can compare apples to apples a little bit.
So when things were shut down on the 12th, I was kind of surprised because I didn't have any data, and I looked at the Iowa County website and it didn't show anything. I mean, as far as what the current case count. Now, maybe I had to drill down to a link, look at their 10 different links to find out, but their actual snapshot didn't really have any data. I think that was updated like 3 or 4 days later.
I will send
the
out
timeliness of it is kind of, you know, it's just slow.
Yeah, I'll send out the link to all the best sites to see this data on, because there are some things that are updated real time. There are some things that are updated, 2 p.m. the next day. The counts that we get in a day are actually the prior day's counts. So it's not something that immediately, like the cases I see in my inbox basket in the morning aren't going to be until tomorrow that they're going to be on the case count. So there is a little bit of a lag to it, but Annika's bringing up the county COVID-19, and this is if you click on the far left side, anyway, are you going to bring that back up, Annika?
Yes, sorry, stop sharing.
It's okay.
There we go.
So the menu on the left side, that current COVID-19 case count, is the link that's on the right there. So it has the date of today, and it's updated again at 2 p.m. every day. So that is where the most up-to-date county information that's been released is. And then if you go to the, it's archived, where is that archived? Archived COVID dashboard. So that's all of the previous dashboards that have come out. So that's where we got the numbers to go back and calculate what our scores were for all those. So that's the weekly count on everything, going back till over the summer. So I think since they started actually releasing the dashboard. And so those actual numbers there are, they give you the numbers where you could go back and say, okay, that's 8.21 cases per day over the last 14 days. You can multiply that by 14. That's a case count in the last 2 weeks. So you can actually use that those numbers to get at all of the raw data that's on the DHS website, but you can also look at the DHS website and see it in a different form too, if you're more interested in that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it seems that all their data comes from the state then.
It all
And-
comes from the database that all of these tests are reported into. So
Right.
the county is getting it from that database, the WEDS database, and then the state is also getting it from that same database. So anytime a test is done, it's entered into that database, and then it's accessible by both the county and the state
So does
public health.
any person have access directly to that database?
Any person, like,
WES
can you and I
database?
look at it? No, you and
Yeah.
I cannot look at it. It's people who have that public health license, so people who are contact tracers and things like that. Because there's private information on there. It's people's names and date of birth and
Oh,
whether they
okay.
tested positive and things like
So
that.
they don't have a more detailed sanitized version of it than basically.
They don't have just an
whatever they want to.
anonymized version. They have these case counts. So if you look on the left side of the screen there, it's the that's the deaths chart. There's one that's by county. So you can go that drop down at the, so this is the overall, since the beginning count. So that's the
Right,
one where you can
yeah.
kind of look at all of the cases that have happened so far. And then if you go up a little further, there's like the real-time chart where you can actually see the graphs, and you can change any one of these to the county level and see where things are at. You can also hover over the line. It'll tell you the number of cases that were, so if you go there, and then if you go up to the line graph one, if you hover over it, it'll tell you on any one date what the case count was.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So I think we have a lot of, back to our topic at hand, a lot of medical knowledge and insight on the committee and our school board. So to Maggie's point, I think I would be comfortable asking them specifically what they're looking for, because I think we have the brain power to gather that information. Does everyone feel comfortable with that?
Yep.
Should we then, because I feel like I've heard it said several times that we do have an underrepresented population within this group, which is like people with young children who specifically maybe with daycare needs. Like, should we then ask, that school board member or whatever to just consider, like, should we be actively seeking somebody who carries a different voice, who can give that? Because that's been said a couple of times that maybe we don't necessarily know what that experience is like. We can anticipate, we can think about it, but we don't know. And so I just am worried a little bit about that population.
Yeah.
I agree very much. I just don't know how you put that out there.
Well,
See,
if
someone
I'm
who's very
not-
disappointed in how the school district, you know what I mean? I just don't know how you.
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
you could start with the board and really have them encourage anybody who has different thoughts, because I think that they're getting feedback from people in situations like this, and to really strongly encourage them to ask to join our group.
And the other thing I would think, as somebody who works within education, like I typically sometimes when I'm looking for a parent voice from a different perspective, I will ask parents, right? So like I would ask some of my parents, I would say, hey, I know that you've had this experience with this particular topic. Would you be interested in, speaking on that or being a part of that? So, I wonder if, and I'm not saying like we should put more things on staff, but is it something that, somebody within that is employed by the school district may know of a parent who may be comfortable, that you could just ask? I mean, the least they could say is no, that they don't want to, but that might be a way somebody might know someone who has a voice who might feel comfortable speaking to that.
Can I request in addition to that too? I also think the elementary is underrepresented, and considering that's the bigger portion here that we tend to have here, where the problems are, I think if we can get an elementary school teacher on this committee, I think that would be, because I'm always very hesitant to respond as the teacher for, it's a different animal down there and I don't know the problems, and I certainly don't want to pretend to give an opinion that isn't accurate. I don't feel comfortable there. So.
Yeah, I agree. That seems to be where the fire is to me. Elementary school.
And I, again, wouldn't want to speak for anyone either. But another way we may be underrepresented is some of the people who have, kids that have, they work with therapists, or they have IEPs, or they have, they need those resources. And when they're not in person, that's not something they get. So I think that's another consideration too. I don't know, just from being there, that I can see, that's something that we want to think about too.
Somebody like Caitlin Ulrich be able to provide some help for us?
Or Angie too. Angie Klein might.
Those might be two good people to tap into to give us some suggestions as to where to reach out to families. I keep hearing, elementary, especially younger age children who might, Bob's got a senior that they're pretty independent. Sarah, you had talked about your kids being pretty independent. Matthew, as an 8th grader, is very independent, but somebody that might need help, because I watched my wife teach kindergarten classes through Zoom, and you think herding cats in person is tough, but oh my God, on Zoom, I need to leave the house. But maybe tapping into some of with the younger children that will need extra help, but hey, I'm working, so I don't know how I'm going to do all these things. If there's a way to find that representation to add to the committee, might be a great idea to put somebody like that on as well. Gives us that perspective of, hey, if we're going to go virtual the week of Thanksgiving and the week after, it's like, well, great. Now now it's ramping up for me at work. I have no one to watch my children because, I only have an arrangement for these days. I don't know how I would do it for these other days that need that perspective, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And that was kind of my reason for supporting that, was just, having 4 young kids that I cannot leave, my oldest of 4 at home. Like just having, even just knowing that could be somewhere on the radar right now. Obviously, yes, things could switch to virtual at a moment's notice, but even just kind of being able to think ahead, okay, maybe around Thanksgiving, I might want to talk to my boss to see, I have that privilege of being able to, I can work from home if I need to. But, just at least putting it on people's radars that maybe they can think ahead about that, I think is important.
Mm-hmm. All right, good discussion. Do we feel like we have covered all topics?
I would like to hear from Matthew on his 2 weeks of virtual versus the hybrid, how that went. And
watch the video.
Yeah, he shared earlier.
He did it before I came here. Never mind, I will watch the video.
Do we just want to clarify who's going to reach out to the elementary staff? Do you want me to do that, or I just want to make sure we have someone assigned?
If you think of it, I would, reach out to Angie and Caitlin and just see if they have any suggestions. I think it's a great idea. Tap into some of our teachers down there. They may know of somebody, because. And
then also an elementary school teacher as well. Is that the two, like a parent of a
I
child?
can shoot it out to the elementary school teacher because I've already sent a few emails across the board to everybody, and I've gotten responses from the elementary. But I'll shoot it out there saying, respond to me. The only issue I'll probably have is if I get 5 responses that want to be part of it, I don't want to be the one that goes, you, right? And for whatever reason. So that would be my only issue.
Yeah.
I would want ahead of time, first person that responds, or something.
Wouldn't that be a great problem to have?
No.
Too many people.
I don't anticipate it. I'm just saying,
Well, I'll email Caitlin and Angie then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it sounds like we will have some follow-up emails just sharing some links, some resources for all of us to reference. Is there anything else as an action item that we needed?
Do you want to set another meeting date now with people online at least, and then I can share?
Yeah, so the next school board meeting is the 9th. I don't know, what are people thinking when do we, our report card gets updated by me on a weekly basis. Is there anything else? I guess maybe we should wait and see what comes out of the school board. Because then we're into the holidays, if we go a month out from now.
If you go the Thursday after the board meeting, that same week, that's the 12th, or you have the 19th would be the following week, and that's the week before Thanksgiving. The 19th would be the 1 week prior to Thanksgiving.
And how far out is the school board meeting scheduled? So we have the 9th, and then is there something in December?
The December board meeting is scheduled for the 14th.
Okay. So I guess what are people thinking? Do you think we need to set anything at this point, or do we wait and see?
What if we thought about this looking backwards instead of forward? So, the semester ends on the 23rd of December. If we were thinking about having a meeting before we actually conclude that semester, what would our purpose be during then? Because we're going to go into the next semester, which the board at that point would have likely chosen, or should be, according to our model, what we're doing. Are we doing hybrid? Are we doing full in? Are we doing phase 2? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So is our voice necessary if they had their meeting the week before?
Right.
You see,
No.
so that's where I'm like, do we need to actually land the week before them? If they're, I think Mitch said the 14th of December.
Mhm.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
So do we
Like
need
the
to land?
10th?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
do we want to be after? I'm just saying, if we're after, I don't know if our voice matters to them
Yeah.
at the end of the semester, or maybe it does, and they're going to make a decision before we come back January.
I
guess
think we
maybe
should have
that's-
something, I think we should have, to your point, I think we should have something on the books prior to the next board meeting on case we are kicking some things back to the school board. So theoretically, they may kick some things back to us or have feedback on the questions and thought topics we've given to them. So I think it would be good to have at least something scheduled between the November 9th meeting and the December 10th meeting, whether that's before or after Thanksgiving is really the question. And before Thanksgiving is only 3 weeks away. That feels very soon. So maybe the 10th would be the best.
The 10th. So that's where I was trying to figure out if we were going to have 2. I was thinking, would we want the one in December before that? Or if not, and we don't care, and we can do it late November and late December, I guess is where.
Right.
late
So then we could do the 19th and the something before school ends. The 19th of November.
19th of November and then 10th of November or December. That would put us,
Those would both be within the like if you think about the next two school board meetings as being like, we want to hit one between then and maybe one after that to deal with something that might come out of the school board meeting in December. So then it'd be either the November 19th or December 10th. They're both kind of far away from each other. It's too bad we can't meet on Thanksgiving, but I think that wouldn't work so well. So one of those, I think maybe just one of those two, I guess, is my opinion. But I mean, I'm definitely open to other thoughts on that.
I guess I would say the 19th then, and then put us at the 17th of December after the board meeting in December. They're a month apart there. On 19th of November and 17th of December.
So maybe set the November one and then wait and see if we need the December one, depending on the outcome.
That might dictate if we want to do another one quickly before the board meets or if we want it afterwards.
You mean on the 17th of December?
Correct. So I think Maggie was suggesting, and maybe I heard her wrong, but say the 19th of November. Is that right? Yeah. 19th of November.
So
And then
that's after the school board to address any questions,
Yeah.
but it is also before the December 14th.
Correct. And then at that meeting, we will decide whether or not we're going to meet before the board meets in December or after the board meets in December.
Sounds good. So it sounds like we've arrived at November 19th.
The chair has decided.
We'll see if I'm still kicking by then. All right. So if there's nothing else, we will adjourn.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.